Yeah.
Where do you want me?
Right. Albuquerque.
There's perfect.
Albuquerque. Who said that?
I did. I just
Scott, of
repeated
course.
it.
Good morning, everybody. Kick off with announcements. First and foremost, Beazer Homes, thank you, Brent. We really appreciate it. Also to our 2021 education title partners, they make this possible. Tiffany Akery with Structure Home Warranty is our 2021. Thank God we get to say that. Title partner. And then we have also Kevin McLean with DuPont. He's also one of our presenters today. Kevin, come tell us a little bit about DuPont.
Thank you, Sheena. Good morning, everybody. My name is Kevin McLean, and I'm with DuPont, despite what that logo says on top of that helmet there. Just to give you a bit of brief background, about a year ago, Dow and DuPont became one company. And so now two iconic companies that competed now are one. And we bring together now one of the best portfolios in moisture management, in thermal and water. I said water already, air management. And so what we're going to see today are some of those products in action. And it makes homes more durable, more comfortable, more energy efficient. It's not rocket science in any means or fashion, but they're very simple products, but very effective when applied properly. And that's a key factor, applying them properly, because if you don't do that, they don't work. So with that being said, I just want to say thank you for being here. Let's keep this informal today. If you got questions along the way, throw them out there. We've got the experts here that can answer. Thank you.
Don't go too far.
Oh yeah.
Also, a partner of this class is Texas Builders Resource Group, and Kevin is going to represent them today and tell us a little bit about them.
Texas Builder Resource Group is a group of associates that have come together for the betterment of the industry. None of us compete with each other. We have people who represent lumber, windows. We got a videographer in the mix. But it's all brought together to help us look at problems that our individual customers are having and find solutions for those people. So it's a networking group, in short. And we've been together for quite some time now. But one thing that we do have in common is our belief and our passion in education. So we sponsor the education classes that are done by the DBA, and that's why we as a group are here.
All right. Now you're off the hook.
Okay.
Okay, then I'll just introduce the partners real quick and we can stop hearing from me. We have Craig Brooks with Burgess Construction Consultants, Danny Stanfield with Weatherization Partners Limited, Kevin McLean with DuPont, and Brett Colby with Beazer Homes. Gentlemen, take it away. Come out.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Well, appreciate everybody coming out today. I think the goal of what we're trying to get everybody to understand today is just to be able to have water management goggles and what we do when companies like us or Beazer or Burgess goes out on the job site and walks the job sites, and really what we're looking at from either a manufacturer standpoint or from a third-party standpoint. So like she said, my name's Danny Stanfield. I work for a company called Weatherization Partners. We are a marketer and distributor for all of the DuPont materials, building materials. We basically handle everything from the Mississippi River to California in the southern half of the U.S. And a large portion of our jobs used to be, sales and golf, and it's really transitioned away from that in the 15 years I've been with the company. And nowadays, it's we're on job sites providing field services every day, and that's what we do on a daily basis, is spending time with builders like Beazer Homes or yourselves. So that's kind of what we do, and appreciate everybody being out, and we'll look forward to the discussion today.
Again, Craig Brooks with Burgess. I'm the Dallas Division President. We're a third-party inspection firm, but we're more than just inspections. Like Danny said, we partner with a lot of manufacturers. We've had Danny in our office through the years, Kevin in the office through the years. window manufacturers, other types of manufacturers, to help teach our consultants how to evaluate the installation of their products in the field. We feel like that knowledge helps us to educate and convey how those should be installed. So when you call in an inspection, our guys show up on your site, educated on the process. In fact, our consultants have gone through the TIVEC and Certified Installers program. So our guys understand what it takes to put it on the wall, how it should be installed. We're also an energy rater, and that's a big part of the business that we do. I know one of the things Danny and I talked about we wanted to do before we got this class going was kind of go around and have everybody introduce themselves, who they're with, what you do, just so we kind of understand the audience. So Kevin, we know you.
Yep.
So
Yeah, I'm Brandon Norman. I'm with Weatherization Partners, DuPont TIVEC.
Yeah, Brandon handles he's kind of oversees all of our field services category for all of North Texas. So he's the guy that's communicating with all the framing crews, cornice crews, whether it's in single family, production builders, or the multifamily segment.
Dallas Division VP for Burgess. I coordinate with a lot of the area managers of different building companies to do this kind of stuff, go out and train with them, and of course a lot of training in-house with our consultants.
Scott Carr with Burgess, handle national accounts covering from Florida all the way to Colorado, working with builders, make sure we get the scopes of work right, and then look to improve. And we have a home run program where we strive for 0 defects on pre-drywall, 0 defects on final, and then we award them with a trophy, which is an engraved Burgess back. So it helps bring up everybody's excitement level and competitiveness and makes a better quality home. So that's kind of what we're about.
I'm Mick Addington with Burgess. I'm the marketing coordinator.
Scott Roberts. I'm not with Burgess. Creative architects. I'm just out here to learn everything that I can, so I know as much about my client's business as I can.
I'm Brett Colby with Beezer Homes. I'm the Quality Assurance Manager.
And I'm Martin Esparza, also with Burgess, and covering from Waxahachie on up to Prosper to Weatherford to Rockwall. So, yeah.
I'm Moralia Monroy. I'm with Milwaukee Tool, and I'm a territory rep for all of the Southeast Dallas area. And we come here and to various job sites to help, hopefully, you guys complete all of your projects with our tools. So.
I'm Luke Neal. I'm part of the same team, but in Northeast TFW.
Jake, V Luxury Homes, custom home builder. Josh Correa, Jr., Divina Homes, single family home builder. Superintendent for the company.
Jonathan Correa with Divina Homes, head of construction for the company. We do mainly spec houses, residential housing in Dallas downtown area, that type of area. But you know, we come from the custom home background, so anytime there's classes like this, it definitely helps us improve our product and to our customer and to the end user. So appreciate y'all putting the class on.
Zach Zimmerman with Royal Martin. We are a plywood and OSB manufacturer.
Macon Pearson with Tim Jackson Custom Homes. I'm a superintendent.
Appreciate you coming.
you bet.
Gina Beaver, Dallas Builder Association.
The Vino Homes guys, y'all made the news last night. I was watching the news, and I guess on the Dallas building permit issues, they went to their sites and did some filming, so it was pretty cool. So maybe that'll speed it up. Years. 15 years ago, we never really dealt with much job site services. There wasn't real big, and there wasn't real big risk. But over that time period, that risk has really shifted, and unfortunately, I guess it depends on who you talk to.
Yeah.
The attorneys have gotten involved. Unfortunate for the builders, because that's something you guys are going to have to face. Invariably, that helps companies like Burgess and DuPont and Weatherization Partners. So we're just trying to act as an ally to you guys to help you manage that risk and stay out of trouble. So that's totally where we're coming from. So, but I think here locally we've had a couple attorneys that have set up in town. I think one builder has already kind of been subjected to the eyes of litigation, and so we just wanted to have classes just to kind of discuss it and make sure that everybody had that had that same mindset. So, I mean, even, Beazer, we'll talk about their process today. There's a car coming, so we're gonna have to take a quick break.
He's not slowing down.
No, this is funny. Everybody,
This is a first.
should we all wave at once?
Do it.
The gauntlet.
At least be friendly.
So even in Florida, Beazer Homes kind of dealt with this same issue on some subdivisions. Brett, I don't know if you want to go into that. And
We had some bad stucco installs that we had to take care of. It was millions of dollars in cost that we had to make it right.
yeah, so here in a minute we'll kind of go into what their process is and what that looks like.
It's Mark, you're fine. Keep
Oh,
going.
okay. Mardan, okay. So what that process looks like, and maybe it's a process that you can implement with yourself and to try to help manage your risk. So just some statistics wise, 90% of construction litigation is due to the water management of the house. So, if you're gonna face water, some sort of a litigation, good chance it's gonna be for the water management of the house. So we're just gonna try to talk about what we can do to curb that and make sure that everybody avoids it. The interesting thing about that statistics is the cost of water mitigation, or the cost of water management is typically only about 1% of the cost of the house. So if you think about it, it's 90% of the construction litigation, but it's only 1% of the construction cost of the house. I looked up, and in 2019, the average cost to build a house from a study from the NAHB was about, in the U.S., was about $296,000. So that means you're really only, spending at the max about $2,900 for the water management of that house. And I think if you walked around and spent time with a lot of builders, they're really trying to avoid getting that even that high. Brett, I don't know from a purchasing standpoint, if that kind of falls in the category of where you guys stand. Your average cost to build a home versus how much you typically spend on water management stuff.
It's the ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right?
Exactly.
So it's well worth the investment just to get it wrapped up. So we don't really have warranty issues with water leaks and window leaks. I mean, and it also helps with our energy with the air barrier. So this whole system keeps us out of trouble, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so if you break down why buildings fails and where those attorneys are actually targeting, about 50% of those errors or construction litigation flaws in water management are just simply due to the installation of the materials. So that's kind of why we've morphed our company into being a more job site service company, because what we heard is, man, Tyvek's a great product, but it's, it just doesn't get installed correctly. So that's one of the quality assurance things that we've tried to have to manage is, if it's a great product but it can't be installed correctly, then what do we do about that? So we got to spend more time on job sites, working with all the different trades that actually touch the building. So let's see, 30% of those failures are due just to product failures. So there's a lot of products up there that really just don't cut the mustard, things that just come out that were well intended that maybe just aren't great. A lot of the cheaper house wraps that you see on the market are typically made overseas, and they're just labeled by different companies that just do product labeling, and they're brought over here in containers, and they don't do a good job of holding out water, and typically that information never makes it to the builder until it's too late. So you guys are buying something from a lumber yard that you think is going to do a job. It's a little bit cheaper, but then you have troubles down the road. So, and then the last 20% would be design, just the design of the house. So, don't mean to pick on the architects in the building, but sometimes you just have a roof sloping down into kicking out onto a window. Stuff that's going to be a real hard challenge. In the multifamily segment, we see a lot of really deep recessed windows and other odd details that make it really hard to manage the water of the building. So just kind of setting the table, that's kind of what we're here to learn today. We want you to walk away with an understanding of what are the third parties guys doing when they come here, and if you got manufacturers involved, what are the manufacturer expectations to help you stay out of trouble. So.
Yeah, regardless, you know, the system, that's something that can and should be inspected and evaluated. I mean, somebody that understands how that system is installed should look at it for you. But to kind of take a step back, and Danny was kind of going down this road, if you look, I got into the home, I've been around construction most of my life, but really got into production home building around the year 2000. And I look back at the system that we used then, and it was some OSB on the corners and some T-ply in the field. And then we'd throw a little paint at that OSB. Well, I started out in this industry as a warranty rep, so I got to see everything that wasn't good that we did. One of the things we did is we were closing out a community. We were having some water intrusion issues in a model. So my boss came to me and said, we need to rip the brick down and figure out why it's doing this. As we did that, we found that OSB, though structurally great, it's not going to keep water out. In fact, it becomes a sponge over time. So that significantly changed the way that we operated at that point. And then you fast forward from there, and the way things have gotten put into code and the way that builders execute and answer the code has changed. So like, for instance, when we're talking about this house wrap or any house wrap, you're looking for a water resistive barrier. The code requires it. When you look at the IRC, the International Residential Code, it's a prescriptive code, so it tells you what you can do. So in there, it actually prescribes number 15 asphalt felt. However, as you go further, other approved materials shall be installed in accordance with the water resistive barrier manufacturer. So that's where these guys come in, right? I've selected a product, now I need to understand it so I can be code compliant, right? So we need to make sure that we're doing that. Other areas of concern are going to be, I got my pages out of order. In fact, I totally lost it. Where'd it go? Oh, dealing with exterior windows and doors, because that's, we'll be right back. What can Brown do for you? Brown can interrupt your class.
Oh, and even this moment right in the middle.
Maybe you want to come join?
Making a delivery.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll probably have time to get through this. You know, as you're talking about that WRB, water resistive barrier, as it's known in the code, for it to be complete, you have to deal with the penetrations. Windows and doors are the most susceptible. Really, any penetration is a risk area and needs to be seriously dealt with. But the code specifically deals with windows and doors, and guess what it says? Shall be installed and flash in accordance with the fenestration manufacturer's written instructions. So, I know Danny's got, if you want to talk about that for just a minute, every window, if you look, you can see they're gone because a lot of the work's been done to the inside of this home. But if you look at the dormer window, you can see that sticker up there. Every window should come from the manufacturer with that type of sticker. And it's going to tell you exactly what you need to do with that window.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's very, you know, if you're from job to job, if you're changing window manufacturers, you know, maybe on this job you use Crestmark, maybe on the next job you use, you know, Plygem or whatever. Understand the different nuances of their install and what the requirements are, because they go from anywhere from instructions on the back on shimming the windows. So let him get through here.
It's like we're on a train track.
It is.
It's live action.
So they go over anything from shimming the windows, where to place the shims, how much to shim it off of the sill pan, and then it jumps into fastening of the windows. One thing that sometimes gets tricky on some of these is, you know, it says this, and the selection of fasteners are the responsibility of the installer. Well, that's pretty vague. I mean, can we use bubble gum? You know, I mean, it doesn't really give an answer, but then you dive a little bit deeper, and it's got basically a best practice a little bit lower. It says to achieve published test results, number 8 1.5 inch truss head screws or equivalent should be used. So it says the window installation is the fasteners is up to the installer, but then, so it leaves it open for interpretation. So is your framer or cornice guy, is he just gonna use a bunch of nails and blow out all the fins? Or is he gonna come back and actually use the recommended, not required, but recommended fastener, which is a number 8 truss head screw. So it gets a little bit confusing, but you just really need to start pulling these off when a window gets shipped to the house and really understand what their expectation. And then you get into the window flashings. They all have a recommended window flashing and a different ASTM or ALMA standard. So look at that, make sure it matches with your system. If it doesn't match your system, then try to get with your local rep and better understand what you got to do to match that. So.
Yeah, when it comes to the window installations, understanding that's key, but not just you managing the job, your trades. You have to have these conversations with your window installer, or it's never going to get done. It's great if you understand it, but it's not going to get executed. I go back again, I draw from my experience in 2000 when I entered the industry. We were using aluminum windows, and you could use the gun and just blow right through it, and you're going to do very little damage to that aluminum fin. It's amazing, with all that we do on a day-to-day basis, it's amazing that some of these windows don't just fall off of these homes. You see nail gun, nails applied with a gun, and those flanges are just gone. Yeah. So pay special attention to the fastener, because you can do the flashing well, you can do the sealing well, but if you haven't attached that window to the wall properly, it's never going to last. And that's one of the things that we're really concerned about in the industry today is durability. And then the flashing, make sure you understand the system that you've selected, make sure it's installed correctly. And then generally on these instructions, you're going to see sealant that needs to be applied to the rear to the rear of the fence. So make sure that's installed. Make sure you've selected a good sealant. If we just want to go out and grab some latex caulk, that's a sealant. But is that going to work in the long run? Not really. It's going to dry out, right? So we want to make sure that we have an adequate sealant, so when that window is applied, it's gonna be that first line of defense, if you will. And then the flashing is extra on top of it. So did we want to get into
Common defects?
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. These, we put together a little handout, and I don't know if we want to pass these around and have them, just pass them out. Don't pass them around. Yeah. Mitigated defects that you see in the industry. The first is penetration sealed. When you look at the photo on the left, just like Beezer here is selected to use quick flash, this builder chose to use quick flash, but his plumber didn't really care. So again, that goes back to education of the trades. They need to understand the products and systems you're installing and understand what they can and cannot do. It's really good there where the gasketed material's around the pipe, but the plumber just drilled right through that blue flashing. Not so good. On the right, you see one where it looks like the plumber used a knife and a hammer saw. Is what that kind of looks like. We have to put penetrations in the walls of homes. We have to for plumbing, electrical, HVAC, low voltage, things like that. But the trades need to be mindful. Don't make a hole any larger than you have to, because the bigger the hole, the bigger the challenge. So talk to them about making sure that they understand how what they're doing is going to impact other trades down the road, your systems and things like that. As we flip to the back, holes and sheathing, didn't feel like more than one photo was necessary there because it's pretty self-explanatory. Holes get put in sheathing for numerous reasons. I tell you, one of the most common we see is the bricker. When he's installing his brick ties, how does he find the stud? With his hammer knocking down the wall. Oops. And you've got a hole, and then it has to be addressed. Base of wall flashing. That one has become really hot in litigation, and the reason why I believe it is, it's real easy to prove that you didn't do it right. If this home's bricked, I can go over here to this corner and I can pull 2 bricks and have a pretty good idea how this was executed. You can see in the picture on the left is done correctly. The flashing is applied over the top of the sheathing rather than applied to the studs and then the sheathing put on it. That protects the bottom side of that sheathing. The one on the right, I tell you, we see this all day, every day. We don't take into account those structural components like those straps. So when the framer comes to attach that strap, he just folds it up, and who cares about your base of wall flashing? I have to secure this, right? Again, that's an opportunity to communicate, train, and improve their execution. And if the base of wall flashing is being applied after, on top of the sheathing rather than prior to, behind the sheathing, it's going to be easier for him to execute and then get the base of wall flashing correct.
The house that he was talking about that he saw in the 2000s when he came in, it was just OSB corners and T-ply in the field. That house had, if you remember in the old days, you ran poly at the base of the wall and you ran poly horizontal at all the sheathing points. Well, that was done because there was no such thing as weather barriers then. So they were just kind of creating an overlapping system. Well, you don't need to do that anymore. You know, now that you're using the weather barriers, or most of you are using weather barriers, that same system doesn't need to be followed. And in that base of the wall, we'll show you here when we walk this house, kind of how that failure at the bottom of the wall happens, and what you need to do to address it properly.
Yeah, like Danny said, I can remember, you know, as the cornice was going up, the first thing that the cornice crews would do, grab those rolls of black poly. They're vertical at all inside and outside corners and horizontal at the sill, and then let's go to town with sheathing. A lot of times that OSB on the corners got sat right down on the brick ledge, so it was guaranteed to wick up that moisture. So we've significantly improved materials and methods today. And then the last one is brick ties. That's another one that's pretty easy for someone to come through and prove that you didn't do right, and you don't even have to remove brick for that. They've got these little sensors, if you will, that you can just go up and down the wall with, and they can tell where brick ties are and where they aren't, and how deep they're embedded in the mortar bed and things like that. Another thing to think about with brick ties is what you choose to use. The corrugated brick ties that we've used forever are not code compliant if you have greater than 1 inch of air gap. If you think about it, we've got, how deep is our brick ledge?
5.5.
5.5. How thick is our brick?
3.
Do the math real quick. 2.5 inches, right? The corrugated brick ties are not code compliant. Just about every city in DFW still accepts them. But if Mr. Attorney knocks on your door, guess what? You're not code compliant. The brick ties that not trying to shill for Simpson Strong Tie here, but the brick ties that they have installed here are usable for a 2 to 3 inch air gap. Simpson has created this, they've tested it, they've proven it. It will work for a 2 to 3 inch air gap. So this is a really good alternative. The other alternative that the code calls out, because the code calls out the corrugated brick tie, but they also call out the wire top tie. You typically see those more in commercial construction. It's got a triangular shaped wire that's attached to a bracket on the wall. That, to me, is the above and beyond. There are some home builders using that today, but most of them that understand where we've gone with brick ties are going to at least this. Yes.
Just comment on brick ties. You see a lot of times when brick ties are applied, they're not nailed properly to the substrate, which should be the stud, right? They just use the OSB as a nail base, and probably not a good idea.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, those wall ties should be in the studs, absolutely, and then they should be spaced properly. It's kind of neat when you do the math in the code. It gives you a every 2.67 square feet of brick should have a wall tie. It's pretty cool when you do the math on that. If you've got a 16-inch on center wall, it should be every 24 inches. If you've got 24-inch on center wall, every 16 inches. Real simple to execute, very simple to verify. When you look at those pictures, it's hard to see it because this is kind of a small photo, but the one on the right, it has the correct brick ties, but notice that the Okay, if you start on the left, you've got a vertical row on the gray sheathing, another vertical row, and then you've got a significant gap until you get over to the first row in the blue. That isn't gonna work. That home is framed with 24-inch on center framing, and so those are probably 4 feet apart. Isn't gonna work. We have to be on every stud at 24-inch on center, and we have to be every 16 inches. So those are things to keep in mind. Very easy to execute, very easy to verify, very costly to litigate. So that's one of those things too. It's not necessarily part of your WRB, but it goes on afterward, right? Another thing to look at is after your bricker's applied those, go back and make sure he hadn't knocked holes in your sheathing. With OSB, it's less likely, but then again, it's more likely it's not in a stud, right? With T-ply, he's probably gonna find the stud. He may knock through it. With the foam insulated sheathing, it's a lot easier to put a hammer through. So if you're using that sheathing, pay close attention after your bricker's installed those ties.
Fred, do you want to kind of walk down the path of how you guys found yourself going from the corrugated to these ties?
So we have quality built inspections.
No.
Oh. Okay. So,
Welcome to the poll.
thank you, Greg. So about 3 or 4 times a year, we have a third-party company called Quality Built that gives us a risk management inspection. They give us a score based on basically the whole house, basically all of our construction, and we use that to report to our shareholders and to our insurance company. Basically, it says, hey, yes, we're building the house correctly, and they look at everything, and they look at it real black and white per manufacturer's instructions, right? So if however, like the window sticker, it has to be done exactly like that. The brick tie deal, if they can see rust on the nail, that's not a corrosion resistant fastener, correct? So what we had, like everybody else in the world, was corrugated fasteners for years and years, and that came up on one of our quality built inspections, and we're like, well, what are we supposed to use? And so we started doing some research, and we found this Simpson product, and started using it. But we've learned a lot from them and from guys like Burgess during these inspections of how we're supposed to be building the home, and from Weatherization's partners as well. So we've learned over the last 9-10 years. We've gotten a little bit better every year. We always find something we could do better, and we continue to improve. So
Yeah, just kind of going through the steps of that process, if you don't mind. But Beezer made the decision after kind of they had some of those issues to do a nationwide standard. So they opened an RFI, had a bunch of different manufacturers come in, and really what you're looking for is a manufacturer that just has all the parts, pieces, and components, because that's what you kind of have to do. And we'll kind of walk through all those parts, pieces, and components in a second. But then, they mandated, once we got involved, they mandated, and we train every subcontractor that touches their house. So, doesn't sound daunting, but it's daunting. I mean, when you start thinking about all the different contractors that touch your house in different subdivisions, you may have Bell Mechanical here, Airtron here, Cathedral Plumbing here, a different plumber here. So all those different MEP contractors, all those different framing and cornice crews, it was kind of a daunting task making sure all those guys were trained. So, it probably created Brett's job. And
yes, that's great.
So he's thankful.
Yeah, yes.
And if you don't have an ally within that builder that you're either a manufacturer or somebody like Craig Brooks can work with you at Burgess, then it's going to be a really difficult uphill battle. So I would really recommend, within your organization, if you can just say, hey, you're going to be my guy that kind of handles that water management, and work with the manufacturers and work with, train our trades, then you can really accomplish a lot, and everybody starts working in the right path. But like he said, quarterly they have a risk assessment. I say quarterly, three times a year. They have a risk assessment that comes in town, and it's it's a pretty intense process. They're looking at not just the exterior of the building, but all the different foundations and stair tread, measurements, just all different aspects of the house. And then they do daily quality checks with a company like Burgess. Y'all do EI, but You can kind of talk about that process.
We have a third-party inspector that they check. They do a regular like seconds inspection, frame, electrical, mechanical, plumbing inspection. They do the weatherization inspection, insulation inspection. Weatherization Partners comes out every 7th house. They check everything. We get a report. So there's a lot of eyes on it above and beyond the city inspectors, right? Because they don't. I mean, everybody catches a lot. They don't catch everything. So the more eyes we can have on it, the better. So we've got and our builders and everybody else. So well, I don't know where I was going with that.
No,
That was it.
finished out.
Yeah, there you go.
What you do is you just tail off.
Yeah, I just mumble something.
And
Yeah.
then just look at Danny and he'll
And
pick
look
it
at
up.
me, yeah. So like I said, we do have a lot of eyes on the house. And so you know, there's no such thing as a perfect house, but hopefully by the time we're done, it's pretty good.
Yeah, and you know, we understand behind us there's flaws, and we're going to find flaws as we walk around these houses. I can promise all these Burgess guys have already said, I see one, I see one, I see one, you know. So, you know, but that's the point. You know, let's put together a process. If you find a flaw, how do you get it fixed before it gets covered up? So that's kind of what we're going to try to accomplish today.
The problem is not the flaw or deficiency. The problem is covering up the flaw or deficiency. So it's important to identify it, have a plan to rectify it, and move on.
Truck break.
Yep.
We are eventually gonna walk around this entire structure. So there's some drier spots. Be cognizant of where you step. Make sure you don't, you know, take a mud puddle or whatever. So just since we've already talked about windows, well, I'll let Craig. He's the window engineer. Go for attachment of the window.
Well, you know, the first thing I noticed as I walked up is the fasteners used here on this bottom fin, and it's the screws. And notice when Danny was reading through that on the sticker, the window sticker, notice that was the manufacturer's recommendation, not requirement. Right? They don't have to do that. But something I'm going to suggest to you is if the manufacturer recommends it and doesn't require it, do it anyway. Because that is going to protect you that much more, right? Manufacturer says, yeah, it's a good idea to use screws, but you know what? You can use nails or, in this case, just about whatever, bubble gum, right?
Yeah, bubble gum.
But yeah, if they turn around and recommend it, that's really what they want to see. When you start talking about these installation requirements, these recommendations, you start getting into warranty implications as well. All of these components on this home, or the vast majority of the components in this home, will have some type of warranty. In order for that manufacturer to stand behind it, you need to install it the way they prescribed. And for them really to stand behind it, follow the recommendations. So they've done that here. Really nice job of the fasteners. You can even you can run your hand up the flashing and feel the frequency of the fasteners, and still you can confirm the type of fastener. So that's great.
Yeah, and confirming the fastener under the flashing is probably not a bad idea every once in a while, because they might just get cheap on you, use the screws at the bottom. They think that's the only thing you're seeing, and then they go blow all the nail flanges out all the way around the rest of the window.
One of our clients has an above and beyond approach to fastening windows. They have a very specific fastener that they want. They want to see every hole in this bottom flange with that fastener and every other up the side. So our consultants are used to running their hands down that flashing to feel for the fastener, the type, and the frequency. So yeah, don't just trust what you see. Touch it and feel it, right?
And I may be out of line, you may have changed, but the window company supplies your screws for the windows, correct?
Yes, and that makes it a lot easier for the installer. If there's a bag of screws there, they're more likely to use them than that, because they're not going to go get them. You know, so we do supply all the screws, the correct screws for the window.
So if you encourage a framer to install it with screws, the odds are he's not. You know, he may do it on the front of the house, but he's going to go. You know, if it's coming out of his pocket, he's going to go back to whatever's the cheapest. 1-inch crown staples. We've seen that a bunch. So.
Yeah, and there's not a manufacturer out there that's going to stand behind crown staples.
No.
Just not. You know, if we go back in time a little bit to before this window was placed in this opening, you want to make sure that the openings are sized correctly. that they're plumb and square, and then from there you start the installation of the window. I know Danny will go through with an actual example here in a little bit, but we're going to start with the sill. We need the sill completely flashed, and we want to come up the corners, up the sides on each of these corners. And then from there, as we referenced earlier, you want to figure out a proper sealant, and it should be applied to both of the jambs and the head of the window. I've seen some manufacturers recommend it for the bottom fin. I would never do that. If you feel like you have to, skip apply that. Don't apply it solid across the bottom, because who can tell me why we flash this sill? Anyone? You're assuming a leak, right? And if it leaks, we need to wait for it to get out. And if we've put a nice bead of sealant all the way across this bottom flange, where's the water going? In, not out, right? We're talking overall water management. So once the window's set in place, should we open these sashes to install that window?
No.
See it a lot, but no, absolutely not. The window gets out of square at that point, and then you've got problems from now on. So make sure they're installing it with the window closed, and then fastened per the manufacturer's requirement, preferably recommendation if they have one. And then from there, we're going to flash our jambs, and then our head flashing. And just like you can see here, this is perfect. The head flashing extends beyond the jambs, so everything is sealed in. I think the only thing that may be different in Tyvek's, in their preferred installation method, is the head flashing you would really like to see integrated with the wrap. So you'd like to see that like a V cut at the top of both sides, a flap folded up, the flashing applied, and then the Tyvek come back down over it. And really and truly, with any house wrap, that's the way you're going to want to see that. That's the ideal installation.
Yeah, so this is an example of, when one of us identifies a problem, whether it be us or EI or Burgess, how do you get that fixed, and figuring out what was the problem. So, Brett and I have already talked about this and talked to the local builder, and the identification of the problem is the windows are taking a lot longer to get here than they typically do. So typically, Beazer homes like to have all the windows installed before the house is wrapped. So what they basically do a flashing first method. Well, nowadays your lead time on windows
Extensive.
It's erratic.
Yeah.
Erratic.
Yeah. So that same process is not able to be followed. So what we're going to have to do is just go back to all the different crews that are facing this problem, and Brandon and I've already talked about it, and figure out a plan to. Okay, we got to get the message out quick. If the Tyvek is already on when you get there, this is how you do it. So you have to have a pretty quick plan to be able to figure it out and have a process to get it corrected if there is a flaw. So we've identified that, talked to the Cornish crew or the framer that's responsible for the subdivision, and the Cornish crew will come back over here and change it out and get it fixed. So, another thing I'll talk about, since we're standing in front of a mold window, these are big problems right now. I don't know if you guys have experienced leaks with them, but not all manufacturers are doing a good job of welding those molds together. Sometimes the flanges aren't even continuous across the top of them. Well, if that flange is not continuous across the top, or there's some sort of a gaping hole up there, if you just put flashing over it and hope that it doesn't leak, it's going to leak, and your manufacturers are not going to stand behind you. So if you've got windows like that where that flange isn't continuous across the top, then talk with your window manufacturer, whoever you bought that window from, and figure out what their expectation is for you to flash that window. A lot of times they sell a little piece that kind of bridges that gap. It's not real adequate, but that's their solution. So have you guys seen that a lot?
Some, yeah.
Okay.
One of the big, you think about with an operable window like this, there's a lot of opportunity for things to go wrong. But some feedback we're getting from a lot of our clients is actually some of the picture windows, the inoperable one-piece windows are where a lot of the problems are lying today. too. So it's something, but like Danny said, it's something in the manufacturing that's slightly inadequate.
Just kind of other elements that you're going to look at when you go out to your house, whatever weather barrier you look at, is it continuous from the bottom of the house to the top of the house. That's one thing that we've really had to improve over the years with Beazer. You can see that they're taping it up here in the gable ends, and making it continuous, so it's got good air holdout qualities. And then, like we talked about earlier, the base of the wall. So this, with Beazer Homes, if you lift that up, you can see it's out on top of that sheathing. So that OSB is completely, kind of encased or covered by a piece of plastic. So in old times, we tucked it behind that sheathing. Well, what happens is your bricker inadvertently comes in here and stacks his brick, and that piece of poly is wrinkled or dammed up. So what basically happens is if that poly is behind the sheathing, all that water is just going to pond up and start rotting on the bottom of the sheathing and wicking up the wall. So Bert, like Craig said, they've experienced a lot of issues with litigation, or seen a lot of litigation at that area. So that's a spot. If you're tucking that poly behind your sheathing these days, you need to go ahead and bring it out and put it on the face of it.
Yeah, as we talked, looking at the brick ties, Brett mentioned this with the fastener. You can see rust on this. These should be non-corrosive fasteners. We've talked about the windows. Kind of the first penetration we come through is here for this electrical for this coach light. And this is an ideal installation of this as far as the conduit for the wire. Sometimes you see a builder's invested in the quick flash. It's a little more expensive than just throwing some tape around it, right? Or maybe we could even just shoot some polysil in that hole. That'll work, right? But they've invested in this, and they put the conduit on it. On this one, you can see the conduit's kind of slid out. It's pretty easy to fix usually. It can be slid back up in there. Well, I say it should be, but if I had both hands free, we could get it up in there. But that conduit will slide back in there. If it's a wire or a group of wires, that's not so good. There's a chance we may see that as we go around the home, but you want to check for that. Here's an example, the doorbell. It would be ideal for that to come through a small piece of conduit rather than just the wire coming through it. And let's see. Doors are another concern. As I mentioned when I went through the code reference earlier, it said doors and windows should be flashed in accordance with the manufacturer's installation. So we'd need to know about this manufacturer and what they specify. That, I think, is going to be an interesting question when we start asking that, because I think a lot of these manufacturers make these doors but say, hey, just install them, fasten them up there and go get them, Tiger.
They don't want the liability
Right.
of it. So it's all following on you.
Mm-hmm. So at that point, treat it like a window. You need to flash the jams, and then the head should extend beyond that jam flashing. At a minimum, you should do that if there's no other installation requirements.
Yeah. A lot of door companies that are manufacturing these doors are putting them together. Arrowhead's an example that you see their truck right back here. You can call your rep to that door company and get them pre-flashed.
Yes.
So they do factory flashings. The key is you got to ask yourself, does that flashing match with what my system, what my weather barrier system is? Because if you buy a door flashing that doesn't match with the system that you're using, if you're using zip or styrofoam or one of the other products, and then they bring, that door like Texas plywood, I think they just naturally attach Typar to every single one of their doors. Well, it's good that it's flashed, but the problem is that it doesn't match your weather barrier. You don't have a warranty, and you're at risk there. So you got to make sure, that's another little nuance that you just got to make sure that door flashing matches your weather barrier. Mm-hmm. So same thing with the windows we really didn't hit on is, when you're picking a weather barrier system, you've got to use all the components of that system or you don't have a warranty. If you bought Tyvek and the lumber yard, the tendency of lumber yards is they're going to stock the cheapest piece of window flashing because they think it's their responsibility to save you money as a builder. Well, it's not necessarily, they are doing you a favor, but they're not really saving you money for the long term. They're saving you money you know, up front. So, so if you pick the styrofoam system, use the styrofoam branded flashings. If you use the barricade system, use the barricade flashings. If you use Tyvek, Tyvek. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Same thing with the door openings. So, you know, we talked about penetrations earlier. That's something a lot of builders just let whatever MEP contractor they have tape with whatever they got thrown in the back of the truck. And that's a problem. You can go to most of these houses, not a Beazer house, but most of these houses, and walk around and you'll see the plumber use zip tape. You know, the mechanical guy used a mastic. The electrical guy used some Porta-Flash. Well, you got 7 different tapes on one house, and nobody's going to stand behind that. So then ultimately, they've put themselves at risk, because if they touch the hole, they make the hole, they own the hole, but also you own the hole as well. So, so just make sure if you've picked the system, start working with your trades to get them trained to flash them the way they need to be flashed.
Yeah, just to kind of revisit something on the door, we had a client a couple of years back that after we had continued to call, flash the door, flash the door, flash the door, they went to their door manufacturer and said, hey, we need to flash the door. And the manufacturer found the flashing tape. I still not clear on who the manufacturer was, because it was solid white. It looked like a flashing tape, appeared to perform like a flashing tape, but we had no way of knowing, because this is branded. You can tell what it is and who made it. So when you're selecting those materials, make sure that there's somebody that's going to stand behind that. On that, they wound up providing us some documentation, and we kind of had to go with it. But at the end of the day, they own it, right? So we brought it to their attention, and it's one of those things you really need to pay attention to when selecting that system. Make sure it's a complete system. Make sure you buy the system if you want the warranty.
It's get a little tight, but I think we can walk around this house this direction and look at all these penetrations. Material was used.
You want to talk about fasteners?
Yeah. So weather barrier systems, they're very specific on fasteners. You know, with the Tyvek 10-year product and labor warranty, we're saying use 1-inch cap staples. We do have an addendum that says you can use 1-inch crown staples, but you can only use every one per every 4 square yards. So we try to really limit them. If you use a crown staple over a non-nail based structure, which would be T-ply, then we want you to tape them. So we want you to really limit the use of a crown staple and a slab staple. That used to kind of be industry standard for the last 10-15 years, but in the last 5 we've transitioned away from it, and we want to put as little of holes as you do in the wall. And those slab staples tend to kind of puncture weather barriers as well, so you really don't want to use that. Any other cap, you know, if it's a orange cap, blue cap, green cap, or, you know, doesn't matter the cap color, as long as it's a cap, whether it's a staple or nail, it's okay. We typically say spacing them out every, 18 to 24 inches, and then 16 inches on center. But if you think about what fasteners are to like a mechanically fastened wrap, is they're holding it on the wall during the process of construction. So you want to use the right one. You can minimize them if you want, as long as it withstands the rigors of construction. But your permanent fastening system is always going to be your cladding system. So if you're coming in and using all these brick ties, that's going to hold it to the wall. If you're using siding or stucco lab, that's going to hold it to the wall. We'll get into the stucco aspect here in a little bit, but that is going to be your major risk for all facades. It is a very difficult facade. It holds water, and it's not very drainable as well. And when we get back around the house, there's some other products that are coming onto the market that gives you that air gap behind the stucco. So anytime you want to use stucco, you really want to minimize your penetrations that you got in the wall. overlaps. We define them as minimum 6 inches. And so, you know, it's kind of hard to see, but if you look really hard, you can kind of see a shading. So you want to have a minimum of 6 inches. I'll say you've got it. Your seam tape has to match whatever sheathing material or weather barrier material you've selected. Even with the styrofoam, if you choose to use the styrofoam, then you need to use the styrofoam branded tapes. If you're using the zip tapes, you can't intermix those. It has to be brand specific to the weather barrier that you choose. Yes, sir.
And Danny, I'll add to that. Even though we are now one company, there are still 2 different products that are used. You see the Tyvek tape. It's for the Tyvek house wrap. There's the Dow Weathermate construction tape that should be used if you're using foam.
Yeah, they are made in 2 different locations, and they're brand specific because they, you know, are chemically compatible with the materials that they use the most. So, I think that's it, kind of right here. We'll keep moving. All right, keep moving down. You get tight, put a mask on. Yeah. So this could be a little bit of an issue. You can see this arched out PVC pipe might create a little bit of a damming problem there. They do double seal these, so you know, that quick flash hopefully would grip some of that water out, but you know, that arch, the way it's done, can lead to some issues.
Yeah, definitely. You know, when you're sealing penetrations, things you really have to be careful of are the angles you create with tapes, the angles you create with flashings and things like that. Just like this could all be fixed by popping that gasket material out. Sometimes you'll see this tape, when it's applied, there's a little bit of a pucker in the tape, and you know, we'll call it a bird's mouth or a pucker. And what does that become? If you think of water running down this wall, it's going to shed off this because it's well adhered and flat. But if we've got a little pucker right here, that's an opportunity for water to get in there. We call that a funnel, because that's ultimately what it's doing, is funneling water toward that penetration you're trying to protect.
The venting systems that HVAC companies typically put through wall systems, I mentioned a little bit earlier, but there's a bad habit in our market of using just this white painted mastic. That is not a flashing. It's just, it's a mastic. It's not, I don't even think it's for outdoor use. But we want to get away from that. And so if your HVAC company's doing it, you know, just tell them they can go to their HVAC supply company and start getting the quick flash boot. Won't cost them much more money, but it'll give you a lot more protection for yourself. Okay, just moving around the house. These fireplace vents, we didn't really know how big of a pain in the tail that they could be, but you know, it's another company that you have to train. You now have to go train the fireplace companies on how to properly set their vents. It is a flanged, it's a flanged penetration, so you treat it just like a window. The kicker is you can't tape all 4 sides because it has to have some place to drain out. So what the fireplace company does is they get some spare Tyvek that's on the job site, they skirt the bottom flange of the fireplace vent and then set it and then tape the 2 sides, so that allows you to be properly shingled all the way around and then have a spot to drain in case there's ever a leak. But it's just another difficult penetration to deal with.
You know, another challenge with the fireplace, because if you think about fireplace installation, and this says it right here, it's hot. And I think one of the challenges that came up, and I think Brett actually voiced this too as they talked through it with their fireplace supplier, is you have the issue of clearance to combustible material on the inside. It's hot. That manufacturer of that fireplace is going to specify clearance around that pipe. Typically 1 inch, but look closely, sometimes it's 2 inches. So you have to make sure you have that clearance, and then this fireplace company, like Danny said, created this nice flange so they are able to tape it and seal it, just like a window.
Well, and with the risk assessment company that handles all Beezer's risk assessments, that's something we had to address with them was, understand from the fireplace company, how hot does it get back here at this surface, and is your flashing rated for that heat? Luckily, it doesn't get that hot back here at this surface. It's only out here. Okay, tankless water heaters. These are terrible as far as how to flash.
They work great.
Yeah. Everybody wants them, but they're kind of a nightmare to flash. They've kind of followed the same system. There is no flange on these, so it's basically just mounted to the wall, and you're just having to roll the flashing up on the sides. We have a flexible material that is a lot easier to use around these, but they do need to be addressed, and they've done a pretty good job on this one of sealing it. We would like to go ahead and see that 45-degree cut at the top and the flashing at the sheathing, and then tie back down over the top of that. So, does anybody have any questions while we're rambling on? Y'all look very organized and like a classroom in 2 lines.
Thank you, Mr. Stanfield. This is whoa. I talked about this a little bit earlier when we were around front. You have bundles of wires that come through, and the single wire alone, this doesn't perform well. You need a conduit around it. We've got a conduit here where these 2 wires are coming out. This is ideal. We're all gonna have this bundle of low voltage wire, phone, internet, broadband, all that good stuff. You can probably find a piece of this conduit or something that would work. Heck, it can be a piece of PEX plumbing if it fits around all of this, because this needs that completely round surface to seal. It will not seal to a bundle of wires. You still have issues with that. Like this conduit, Smurf tube as a lot of us call it, it seals well to it. So we want that, not single wires.
So that's another trade that you have to think about and train to make sure that they're doing it. Your audio guy. So I left them out when talking, but we've worked with their audio and also the pest control companies.
Pest control, and another one, if you're building really big homes, you have fire sprinklers, right? Or if you're building multifamily, you have fire sprinklers. And I don't like to take shots at people, but 2 trades that I typically see that by their performance they think, don't worry about it. It's those 2: low voltage and pest control, and I guess it's 3, and the fire sprinkler people. And I don't think it's the fact that they don't care. I think a lot of times they don't know. So it's our job to educate, make sure they understand that what they're doing compromises water resistive barriers. On the inside, what they do compromises structure. So make sure you're having those conversations with those trades specifically. I've found that they're generally compliant once they know, but most of the time they're like, wow, I never knew that. So have those conversations.
So we'll let everybody get back here first. Thanks for that. Yeah, I'll have to do. Okay, so just getting into the back of the house, lintels, that's another big area. Supposedly, lintels can be floating over the garage, but a lot of cities, municipalities are making them attach it, just like you see behind. So they've got, massive bolts going through the wall, and so you do not want to leave that untreated at the top. And so you can see kind of what they've done. They've put a piece of peel and stick over the top of it. It kind of seals the top of that, then drapes down over the top of the lintel. So we do have transition details that that approves that transitions and step flashings can be face sealed, especially if you're transitioning from one facade to the next. But that is an okay transition to a lintel. You can see that, you know, by the sequence of the project, that the penetration was probably flashed and done before the masonry guy shows up. And so if you look at this quick flash, it's just a challenge that you're going to face, and that, you know, you're never going to get away from. But the flashing for the quick flash boot now are improperly shingled with the flashing on the lintel. So it's a challenge. It's something, you know, like not every job is going to be perfect, but it's just keeping those water management goggles on for yourself to try to identify that. And if you can identify it beforehand or before it happens, to try to get that fixed.
This is more of a masonry question, but with the lintel attached, should there be a poly on that steel so if the wood moves, the brick doesn't?
They attach the poly when they come back, don't they?
Yeah, it should have. By the time the brick's installed, it should be there so that you get the proper drainage.
Well, just,
and then you should have weep holes.
yeah, just so it doesn't, the lumber doesn't pull the brick and push the brick. Yeah, got it.
Well, I'm gonna, you know, I kind of referenced this, but didn't have a good example on the other side. But you can see where the tape's wrinkled here. That's an opportunity for water to get into that tape. So it's one of those, you know, there's a lot of places where we try to hurry, where our trades try to hurry. Water-resistant barrier is not the place to hurry. Take a little bit of time, make sure that tape is smooth and is properly adhered. Now there was a place over here Scott caught that was a little bit loose, so you want to make sure it's properly adhered and flat to the wall. Some other considerations is I'm standing in front of a door, right? This manufacturer is not going to have a detail because the manufacturer is the framer basically, right? Because this door has nothing to do with this opening. It just happens to be in this opening. So we need to think about how we're going to seal the sides of these. Different sheathing manufacturers and WRB manufacturers have different details for this, but something that you need to think about is this piece right here, this garage door trimmer, is serviceable. At some point, it's going to wear out, right? At some point, we have to replace that. So when I pull this off, what happens to my seal on this corner? It's gone, right? There are some manufacturers that specify the flashing to go inside the framing. That way, because at the end of the day, we're trying to protect that framing, right? So that may be a method you may want to look at, and especially depending on your manufacturer, because then it allows the serviceability of this trimmer but doesn't compromise your WRB. Not long ago, actually, the CEO of our company, his personal home, he had some water leak issues. So he enlisted my good buddy Mark and I to go over there and kind of oversee some tear down forensics and rework. And he bought an existing home, and I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but there was an area that there was a huge concentration of water coming down over this garage door. The sheathing behind it, our good friend OSB with a coat of paint. That's where, that was probably one of the first places. That and the fact that it didn't have kick-out flashing. If it would have had kick-out flashing, it probably would have been fine. But it ran down the face of the stone, soaked through the stone, and just over time soaked through the OSB, and then ultimately soaked into this nice LVL header, and then soaked into the garage door trimmers. When we got all the brick off of it, brick and stone off of it, I climbed up there and I dug a hole this big in the OSB with my bare hands trying to see what was going on behind it. I went up to that LVL header and with my fingers like this, chipped off, it was a 14-inch header, and I chipped off 4 inches of it with my bare hands because of water. One of the most destructive forces in nature, see the Grand Canyon, right? Obviously, we're not going to have that much water in our homes, but every little bit of water is a problem. And a little bit of attention to detail today, or detail in the late 90s or in the early 2000s when his home was built, we wouldn't have that problem. So, just some things to think about. And garage door trimmers we brought in too. So when we went back, when we reconstructed wrap that stud and put a fine house wrap. We do have a weird Tyvek product that not everybody uses. It's called Tyvek header wrap, which is basically an 18-inch by 100-foot piece of Tyvek that your Cornish guys can install. Beazer does it for their air quality, or whatever you call it, energy code, air barrier standards, to where when the guys are building the soffit, the Cornish crews are building the soffits, they're running all that Tyvek, that top band you see tape up at the top plate all the way around, so it gets a good seal all the way up to and through the top plate. So. If there's part numbers, that label that you see, and it specifies on that label what size of penetration that panel is used for. So sometimes these trades get real tricky, and let's say they have a 1-inch hole, panel, and they're trying to get it on a 4-inch type pipe. You cannot amend the rubber gasket. You can't cut it out yourself. It has to be specific to the penetration that it's supposed to use for. So Brett and I were doing a walk on a house one day, and they actually had an electrical box cut out of the round panel. So sometimes you see some really funny stuff, but that's what that sticker shows right there. Just keep moving through the mud. Might walk on this side a little bit drier. Walk goes. Does anybody have any questions, thoughts? You can ask about other materials and other opinions. We're fine with that. We'll be, if it's something I can't answer, Craig will sees a lot of stuff, so he can hop in there. You guys have any questions?
You're doing a great job.
Yeah. Chinese. Very thorough. Japanese. For you, Doris. Yeah, so it's just what we'll do is we'll finish out with kind of Beazer standard window install. Brandon here is going to help. Here, I've cut out the Tyvek right here. You want to move it down? We'll move it down and so this is kind of the process that Beazer uses. Obviously, they got the structural T-ply on it. The first thing their Cornish crews do is they're going to set a skirt at the bottom of the window. So it's basically just a small piece of Tyvek that they attach to the bottom of the window, because Tyvek's typically not installed when the windows are set. So this flashing method allows you to set the windows, flash the windows before your weather barrier gets installed. So in production home, they've kind of made that decision that this is the way to go, because a lot of cities, Little Elm and Frisco specifically, they want the window installed for the sheathing inspection. Is that correct, Brett?
Right.
Okay. So they want to come in here. They want to. The city wants to see how the windows fasten for the sheathing structural inspections, and so this is kind of the easiest process that most production builders are going to have to follow. So what they've done, they put that skirt on, and then they put what's called our flex wrap. There's other flexible membranes, which is the seal pan flashing. Weathermate, there's a lot of different ones you'll see out on the market. Weathermate has kind of these rigid plastic ones. I'm just going to pull them out that you can use. They'll basically set in that seal pan just like that, and they've got end dams on each side, and you can connect those. Craig, where you at? Yes, sir. Is black poly an approved seal pan anymore? Not really. It's used a lot, but yeah. Probably want to stay away from it. So if you're still kind of in that mood of using that black poly, you might want to move away from that. Most window manufacturers, high-end window manufacturers, if you use Anderson or somebody like that, they're going to specify a flexible flashing be used in their seal pan. They want it to be monolithically protected and not have a bunch of cuts. So the window is then set.
you can see that Brett even, yeah.
Before you get into the window, I just want to make one observation, one thing that I see a lot as I drive around the city. Beazer takes the extra step of applying the weather-resistive barrier over top of a paper-based material, basically, which is what the T-ply is. And some people use it as a weather barrier. But you heard what I said at the beginning, it is a paper-based product. So be very careful about using a product like that and leaving it unprotected. Redundancy is very important when you're talking about water management. The more that you do it, the better off you're going to be. And Beezer's doing a great example here of redundancy.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend, if you go on the ICC's website, the ICC, International Code Council, has a list of approved and tested ICC weather barriers. Pull that up. That generally gives you a pretty good idea of somebody that went through all the proper testing, and you know that gives you a pretty good idea of a weather barrier system. So, but you know the material. The tough thing about T-ply is it doesn't feel like the greatest material in the world, but it's consistent in pricing. And you know, a lot of companies using OSB right now. OSB is an amazing product, and I do wish every builder in the market could use OSB. Earl Martin guy says the same thing, right? Yeah. But it's a commodity-based product, and so the prices go up with the panel prices, and you know sometimes it's the same exact price as the T-ply, and that's a good time to use OSB. And then sometimes, like right now, or you know, it's really high, so it's a tough time. You know, so companies like Beazer Homes have to have kind of a base. You know, baseline's not the right material. Just a consistent material on the wall.
Predictable
Predictable
price. Yeah.
So you know, Brett and I were actually talking the other day. Surely someday there's going to be this product that's in between the two, that's in between OSB, that's in between T-ply, that can be a consistent, predictable price in between the two. So, anyways, he set the window and seal it on 3 sides, screw the window in, and then they leave it. They're gone. They get their sheathing inspection. And then the crew later comes back and installs the tie back.
Flash it on too.
Yep, go ahead. Whichever one you want. Brandon here's going to help flash the window.
This is the DuPont flashing tape. Thing with the window flashing tape, you want to make sure it has a paper backing. So a lot of places, a lot of builders will just use a tape that comes on a roll. So if it doesn't have a paper backing, then it's meant to release from itself. So this is a smooth surface as well, so it might want to release as well. So make sure you have a paper back on the flashing tape. We're going to go about 2 inches above the window. Go down past the flex strap or your sill fan, whatever you're using. Try not to get any creases.
It's a lot easier when it's warmer out.
Yeah, so that's another thing with flashings. Every flashing has a temperature rating. So that's something when you get a flashing, depending on what the makeup of the chemistry of the adhesive is, asphalts typically don't get installed below 40 degrees. So that's kind of their cutoff line. The butyls are typically about 20 degrees. I will say, if it's a morning like this morning, and where you're going to have a frost on the wall, you need to wait till that frost kind of gets off the wall and dries up a little bit, because it's just not going to stick. So and you can also follow the sun. That's another recommendation that we typically have is, you know, the sun's coming up, you're getting sun on this side of the wall, that sun's drying out that surface. Follow the sun around the building, and that will help you get a better adherence.
So
Sequence is important as well. You want to do your jams first, and then the head flashing. And the head flashing should cover the jams completely.
So we don't require our tapes to be rolled. It's not a bad thing. I mean, it's technically a good thing. If you're using OSB, you know, it's probably not a bad idea to go ahead and get a little extra pressure on there, but it's not required. There are the asphalt-based adhesives, like if you're using like FortiFlash, if you look at their installation guide for installing on top of OSB, it requires a primer. That's something most people don't ever see, but it's just not going to stick that well. So you want to pre-prime with like some sort of a primer or adhesive. But just follow your manufacturer's installation guides, and that'll help you get there.
Danny, why does Brandon run that top piece way past the window like that?
It was just a bad cut, but it does need to go past the.
You need to go. You need to at least go. You need to at least go 1 inch past your jam flashing. So, if you want to do the manufacturers a favor, just keep running it out there, and you know, nobody's gonna complain.
Go a little further.
So we typically don't endorse a real sloppy install, but we'll try to do a good job here. But we're going to keep this for sake of time, try to get this going, see if it doesn't hit my hand. We got a Three Stooges moment.
That's a lot of trust, yes.
We injure ourselves a lot.
I was telling people earlier I was doing a flashing presentation one time and cut through the flashing and stuck a knife directly into my leg. And so then I just kind of looked at everybody, was hoping it wasn't going to bleed, and it would just, I had to leave, go to the hospital, get stitches. So you got to be careful sometimes. Yeah. I did. I wrapped it up. I finished the last couple of spots.
Put a bow on it.
Yeah, so it's kind of like wrapping presents. You know, the more you do it, the better you get. But, also want to cut off the window. Next step, let's put the tape on. Find the edge of the window.
This is the part that you got to be real careful on. That we do a lot of inspecting with the Beazer houses. That when those guys come back and install the Tyvek over the top, that they don't dig too deep with that knife and cut your flashing, because it is an opportunity for to do damage to the flashing.
Then also, so this one, the skirt at the bottom goes all the way to the wall, but if it didn't, you need to pull it out over on top of the Tyvek. So you just cut a little downward 45 to get to the edge. Then you'll just bring that skirt out of the top.
See, he cut himself. He got
Yeah.
blood on it. So.
Not a staple.
So then you just finish it off for lack of time. We're just going to go ahead and finish this out. You'll just tape off the edges of the skirt. You're going to come in here, tape this down. So you kind of get a double layer when you do this approach. You get a flashing layer, then you get your tape layer of the Tyvek over the top, tape layer of Tyvek over the top, and then tape the top of it as well. So if that makes sense to everybody, or if anybody has any questions about how or why you did something, you know, feel free to throw it out there, and we'll happy to address. thoughts?
Back on the brick ties, the nail requirements. What, the length gauge.
Brett,
You have to, the Simpson tie, it specifies, I forget exactly what it is. It has to be, I think you have to be at least 1.5 inch penetration into the stud.
Right.
And non-corrosive number 8, something like that. When you look at the Simpson, whatever, HT5, whatever that is,
Right.
it'll tell you exactly what you're supposed to use.
I printed a copy.
Oh,
I thought it might come up.
Look at you.
Try to be prepared.
Good job.
For the Simpson, oddly enough, the model number on these is BTH, I believe. Brick tie, right? All right, the BTH fastener.
I've had discussions with my bricklayer. I think he's using regular.
It gives, it's a 0.131 inch by 2.5 inch. So, and then the code prescribes, I know I've got it here.
Outdoor nail gauge.
An 8D common, which that's basically the 0.131 by 2.5 is an 8D common now. And this calls out the spacing. It tells you that like Simpson has just to talk about their products, they've got several different brick ties. They've got one like the corrugated that fits a 1 inch airspace, one that fits to a 1 but less than 2, and this particular tie works from 2 to 3 inches. So it's ideal for the way we build homes. 5.5 inch brick ledge, 3 inch brick.
Yeah, that's kind of become a big deal. So, if you take one thing away from today, maybe go back, talk to your masonry contractor, get that change made over to get the proper brick tie. That's something that, homeowners will feel that's important as well.
And you still have to bend them down into the brick, right?
And then there's that, yeah. Because you should have at least 1.5 inches, and it should be 5/8 from the face. So sometimes you see them stick all the way through the face even.
I remember years ago when I worked with the volume builder, there was a house, we walked up to the wall and you could push the whole brick wall and the whole wall would go.
What's,
I won't say the name.
what's his name? Drawing a blank on the name. Posted on LinkedIn just this week a video, and it was a wall like that. They'd taken some brick down below, and it's just like a 2 to 3 second clip. But they had taken some brick out below and everything above came down because there were no wall ties.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or final thoughts?
With no question, I mean, if there's no questions, I'd just say, pick a system, learn the system, teach the system to your trades, and make sure that it's executed.
Anybody online have any questions? You can unmute yourself and ask.
I've heard some builders say that what they will do to help train their crews is to build a mock wall like that.
It's outstanding.
And when they do the training, they basically say to their crews, "This is what I want you to build in the field repetitively." And if it doesn't look like that, then it's not right. And it's a good training model for any of you that are builders to do in-house and in a comfortable setting.
And if you've got a trailer in a subdivision, like a lot of these subdivisions do, you can just pour yourself a little slab over to the side next to the trailer. Have your framer frame up something like this, and if anytime there's a question, just you point to the example. Or if they get confused and don't know what to do, they can go look and see what the proper thing to do is. If they use the wrong material, and you need a backup to say that you specified something else, you can say, well, go look over there, and that's what you were supposed to use. So, final thoughts for myself is, like Craig said, follow the manufacturer's instructions. Facades do matter. Brick is really forgiving. It's got a you know, inherited air gap that you get there. You know, we get a lot of people call and say, come help us with this stucco problem. Stucco is a major problem. Beezer Homes has made the decisions here. They just don't even do it in this division. And you know, there's apartment complexes. If you see an existing apartment complex that has scaffolding set up outside of it, take an extra trip, go back, go see what they're doing. A lot of times they're reskinning the entire structure. There's 6-7-year-old stucco buildings that they're having to rip all the stucco off, and they're hoping they can just improve the weather barrier and then go right back up. But what they're finding is all the OSB is gone, and the cost. Then they're going to have to move people out of the buildings and replace the sheathing. And then they found out that the water's gotten into the insulation, so they got to get an insulator to come back out there. So it's a problem, and it's, you know, it's not the sheathing manufacturer's fault. It's the cladding system is not draining, and a lot of solutions that the stucco industry has said, well, we'll add elastomerics to the system to try to keep water out. Well, the problem with doing that is the elastomerics that you've added into the system, they do lessen the amount of water that gets through, but you're still going to have cracks in the stucco. And what's going to eventually happen is water gets back there, and then that elastomeric slows the drying time down. So code basically says 2 layers of grade D equivalent felt over wood-based sheathing. One last car. Grade D, two layers of grade D felt over wood-based sheathings. I would say go ahead and start finding a drainage mat to be your second layer. So you have a layer that's something like Tyvek or whatever your prescribed weather barrier is, and then your next layer is going to be a drainage mat, which is basically, is everybody familiar with drainage mats? Yeah. Okay. We'll show you an example. If you want a sample, we've got, it's not ours, there's other companies out there, but it's just basically a fiberglass product that creates a little separation on your second layer, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch of separation, so when water gets through your stucco, it gives it a nice space to be able to drain down the wall. So
We have a question. Jordan Jones wants to know, will rain screen help reduce or eliminate the risk of a stucco system trapping water?
So yeah, it's exactly what we're really talking about here. It's a rain screen system. Drainage mat is considered a rain screen system, and